Hi guys, what's up? Welcome to episode number 10 of Sport Vitamins. Today we have another strength coach and we go to the Euroleague with Luka Svilar, the strength coach of Baskonia Basketball. Welcome with us, Luka.
Hey, thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate uh, conversation, and I also appreciate a lot what you're doing. I've been following the Sport Vitamins for a while, especially the episodes in English, because the Italian I cannot understand, but the other episodes were amazing. Sorry, were amazing, and I really appreciate it.
Okay, Luka is, of course, as I said, the strength coach of Baskonia, but he's also the host of another podcast, very famous podcast right now, one-on-one physical performance interviews. And I've been following his podcast lately, and I was like, man, I need to have an episode of my podcast with this guy because he's so good. And here's why Luca is here with us today. So, without further ado, Luca, let's start with a quick background.
Well, it's pretty simple. I come from Croatia, but I work in Spain. Now I work with Baskonia, as you said. And before I did my master's studies in Zagreb at the University of Zagreb, School of Kinesiology. And during my studies, I started to work. My first internship job was in Basketball Club Zagreb, where I spent 1 year with junior team. And we had a really brilliant team back then. It was Dario Šarić on the junior team and Mario Hezonja. And I was really lucky to be with them and to do good work. And then my mentor invited me to join Croatian national team under 18. And then every summer I spent with under 18, under 19 national teams. Then I joined the senior team as an assistant. And for me, that was like first 4 or 5 years what I did in basketball. And then when I graduated, I started to work in one company in Zagreb, which was like a sport company called Biotraining, where we worked individually with athletes. So during the year, I would work individually with athletes. Summers would be with the national team, and I would also give lectures at the university. And that was more or less the first 4 or 5 years after I graduated. Then I also went to Turkey for a season. Well, it was almost 1 season. And then I continued to work in the company. I was waiting for a good opportunity in basketball, and then offer from Baskonia came. And now this is the 4th season in Spain. So more or less, that's it. I continue my education here in Spain at the University of the Basque Country. I did my PhD. And that's basically it. Quick background.
You have traveled quite a bit during your career, and especially when you were studying. How important is that for you?
Well, I think for me it was very important because first of all I met tons of great people, and I can call them friends because there is one great thing about this student exchange. And first I did during the 3rd year of my studies, and I went to Slovakia, which is pretty close to Croatia. It's not like so far, and the mentality of people is very similar. And students were mainly from Europe, like France, Spain, Croatia. You would have Slovak students and so on. So I met a lot of great people, and I still meet them whenever I travel. And the great thing about this kind of connection, when you travel as a student, you don't devote too much time on a daily basis to stay in touch with those people. But whenever you meet them, you're kind of still have this great relationship, and it's so easy to talk with those people. So I consider them friends, and for me it's a great pleasure, to have them. So for me that's always the great part of this exchange studies. Then I later on at the 5th year of my studies, I did one exchange studies in Sweden at Lund University, and it was more like worldwide students. There we would have students from China to South America and all over Europe. I had 2 of my great friends there were from South Africa, and it was really good. So even though I don't see them, we are in touch, and whenever we get chance or we will have chance to meet again, I know it will be great. So that's probably for me the most important thing when it comes to traveling as a student. To get to know new people, make good friends, and meet new cultures, experience new cultures, try to get to adjust to it. And I think that's something with what improves your value as a person. And then later on as a coach, when you travel, of course you will make new friends, but I think the most important thing is that you can it's an easy way to share your knowledge. And what is even more important for me is to listen to people who want to share experience, and then with that I'm able to learn through their experiences. And every conversation, like we just spoke a couple of minutes ago, we don't know each other personally, but in March my team is traveling to Tel Aviv to play Maccabi, and hopefully you will be in Israel and you can come from Jerusalem so we can meet. And that's something what is the most valuable thing. First we're going to talk about general stuff. For sure we're going to talk a little bit about hot topics in the world of strength and conditioning, and for sure for the next couple of days I'm going to go in my head through these things that we're going to talk about. So I think this is the most valuable part of traveling.
Sure, that's really important. Like developing your network and get to know as many people as you can. Also, you have the chance to share your knowledge and share ideas and get to know new ideas. And I think in our world, in our field, is key. So, Luka, how did you get a foot in the door?
Well, ever since I was a kid, I was enrolled in some basketball programs, and even though I have never reached a high level of basketball, back in the high school, I realized that I'm gonna apply for studies in sports science. I always loved basketball, and back in my studies, like early studies, I knew that I'm not gonna face a career as a basketball coach because I was never good in tactical part of basketball. It was more like skills, and then from skills I was more into this physical performance part. So I decided that at the second, third year of studies that I'm gonna start focusing on strength and conditioning field. And in the third year of my studies, as I said at the beginning, I knocked on the door of my mentor. He was a university professor, well connected. He was back then head of physical performance or head of strength and conditioning in the national team, and he was coordinating youth teams. And I knocked on his door, and I told him that I want to get an internship, like kind of a job. And he said, like, okay, you have a job in Basketball Club Zagreb, where he started, and he sent a couple of his students before. It was, as I said, like really good program with a lot of young prospects and really good head coach who really wants a support of younger strength and conditioning guys. And as I said, after that season, I joined the national team, and then I realized that if I stay well connected and if I do my job well, I'm gonna be able to make my career in basketball. And I worked with many different athletes individually, with football players, with tennis players. I really enjoyed working with tennis players. I really like going on tennis tournaments, but for me, basketball was always priority. And whenever I had chance to work with a team that would be really challenging and new experience for me, I would accept it. And that's how I accepted the offer from Turkey. That's how I accepted the offer from Baskonia eventually.
Okay, but like most of the strength coaches out there, you started with youth departments, right? How was that?
Well, for me, it was a great experience. For a young coach, youth teams seem like senior team now. You try to do everything with great passion. Preparing yourself every day for every single detail in that practice. So now you have responsibility and you have to take care of all of the details. And back then you were doing it because it was the only way. So basically, for me, there is no big difference. The only thing is that back then I didn't know exactly, like I knew what I'm going to do and why, but maybe I would not be as sure as I am now,
Of
But the
course.
most important thing for me was that after every training session, I can go back to my mentor or I can go back to my colleagues and discuss it and try to improve whatever I did not wrong, but like what I was not happy about, and that was for me the most important part.
I also started with a youth department. I worked for 7 years in Rome for Stella Azzurra, and when I look at myself, I always think that back in the day it was easier. I was just graduated, and I thought I knew it all, so everything was really easy. And the more I study, the more I keep learning, the more I keep reading, and the more I realize that I don't know. And for example, I'm curious about your daily routine because you're a researcher, you're a strength coach, you're them all, and you definitely bridge the gap between research and the basketball court. And how can you learn so many things? How can you do both?
Well, I'm gonna explain my daily routine, which is nothing special, but I just try to manage my time wisely, But I would not call myself a researcher, even though I did my PhD studies and we published quite many good papers. Especially, I call them good papers because they are valuable to the field because of the load monitoring and management in basketball. It is still a field with very poor research, and I think we contributed to the field, not only me, but the whole team, especially my mentor here, Julian Castellano. And that was one contribution. Now, contribution to science goes through our strength and conditioning coach, who is working with the first team and with the second team. He's doing his PhD, so I'm kind of helping him, co-mentoring his projects, but it's not something that I could say that I'm working on a daily basis. There is a lot of guys who are real researchers who are devoting their daily work to this part, and that's why I would not call myself a researcher. I'm like occasional researcher who would help now some other people in their studies. I will make revisions to some papers every once in a while, and I'm trying to stay close to people who want to publish and who will publish something, so I can be part of great research. But that I'm now going and putting a lot of effort to publish my studies, it's not the case. I think in order to call yourself a researcher, you have to publish at least every 2-3 months something. And that's not the case for me. In the last 2 years, okay, I had a couple of good publications, but I cannot say that I'm gonna maintain it. So my daily routine, if I tell you about today, well, today I spent all day at work, which is not so usual, but since we had day off yesterday, it was Monday. Today it's Tuesday, so we made a double session, and I came to work at 9. I woke up early, regular, like around 8. I do my routine that I have in the morning. I came to work at 9 to prepare everything in the gym. At 10, we did lifting, and after that it was individual skills. We had lunch, and then after lunch I grabbed quick coffee with my fiance, and then I got back to the office. I worked at my computer for an hour and 30 minutes. Then I hit the weightlifting room. I did my workout before meeting with physios and medical stuff that we had. And after that, I went back to the gym, and I was waiting for the guys who came to lift again or do some preventive work. And then I was on the court waiting for the guys to come after video. And we finished. I was here with Ugo to do the transfer of data from Catapult. And now 30 minutes after, I'm here with you, talking to you. But that's really hectic day when it comes to work. Sometimes when we do, most of the days we practice once a day, So I have much more time to read, to write some things that I want to write, or watch or listen to some interviews and podcasts. So that's basically my daily routine. What I try to do is I try to have great respect to my fiance, who came with me to live here in Spain. I mean, she works here. It's not that she's bored. She has a really good job. She's a sport director here in one big fitness center. But still, in the evening, I try not to have a laptop in front of me to do my things. So if I can do everything what I need throughout the day, I do it. And then in the evening, around 8:30, we try to eat dinner. And then after that, we either go for a drink or we stay at home and we watch some documentaries or movies.
I understand that. I do the same thing, and I can't help myself about reading in the morning and studying in the morning, but I'm lucky because I'm an early morning guy. I wake up at 6 in the morning, and my fiance doesn't wake up at 6 in the morning. So they say from 6 to 7, 7:30, that's my time. I can do whatever I want there. So that's perfect. And is there a specific routine that you encourage your players to have, for example?
Basically, I always talk about the quality of sleep, and for me, that's a routine that they have to follow. I think it's important, especially when we are at home, that they go to bed at a more or less similar time of the night, and to wake up more or less consistently. Not to wake up one day at 8 and the other day at 12. So sleep routine is probably the one that I would stress the most, and then everything else is based on the schedule. I cannot talk about daily routines because every 3-4 days we play a game. Every 3-4 days we travel, and then travel sometimes the charter flight in the morning, sometimes charter flight after the lunch. I can give you so many examples, but the rhythm that we live, especially in Euroleague, with so many games, it's very, very different. But I think if you put under control the basic stuff, that you respect your sleep schedule, and then that you respect your dietary habits to eat all important meals. Well, of course, we have some guys who would skip breakfast and do some intermittent fasting and so on, but to at least follow their good schedule with lunch and dinner or whatever, I'm always down for that. But I cannot say that I'm putting like a daily routine in front of our guys, and I push them to follow daily routine, because most of our guys have kids, and then something always happens with kids, or they want to spend more time with their kids because they were for 7 days on a tour, and so on. So I just try to stress the basic stuff, and then everything else I know that they will put under their control.
And as strength and conditioning coaches, we need to manage a lot of stresses of our athletes. And of course manage the load of a lot of games and a lot of practices, especially in the EuroLeague, which has a crazy schedule, right? And how do you manage it?
Well, I think the greatest challenge for us is actually not the games and work that we have to do. The greatest challenge for us is to convince head coaches that they have to change a little bit how they approach their work, because in Europe, coaches, most of the head coaches are used to work many hours in the gym and go through the sets many and many times and tape for every practice, which eventually will cause a significant fatigue. So I'm not worried about crazy schedule in EuroLeague and so many games that we have, because I'm not afraid if EuroLeague will have very soon 20, 22, 24 teams, and we will have more games. The most important thing is what we do in between those games, So it's, as you say, a lot of stress, a lot of fatigue accumulated, and we have to be especially careful when it comes to short rotation and teams that would use only 7, 8, 9 players on a regular basis. And the priority in between the games, it's physical and mental recovery. And I think that is one of the most important parts. So when it comes to recovery, I always stress sleep. As I said before, for me, sleep is definitely number one. Nothing can be compared to sleep. And then after that, I encourage players always to take care of their habits when it comes to nutrition, especially players who are high loaders in the games, who would play 30, 35 minutes, and not only like regular nutrition and diet, but a little bit more rich in carbohydrates, which is super, super important, to replenish all the glycogen stores, and we know how it works. And of course, to stay hydrated, with regular water, iso drinks, and so on. Then, for sure, one important part for all of the players, especially when we are traveling a lot, will be supplements. So supplements which will supplement the macronutrients, and then on the other hand, something to protect immune system. That's one part of recovery as well. I focus also when it comes to recovery, I try to focus on active recovery. So when we get back to our facilities, we will maybe use bikes as active recovery for like 20-minute cycling, 15-20 minute cycling, or a day after the game when one group will do a little bit more work on the court. Maybe one group will watch sets that we are preparing for the next game, and they will just do some cycling. I also like to do myofascial release with foam rollers, little balls, whatever the equipment is, and some stretching, breathing exercises, just deep breathing, or even like Wim Hof type of breathing. I recorded some videos for my guys so they can get like instructions if they want to do some kind of breathing at home and so on before going to bed. I also encourage players to use compression garments. I think it's a very valuable piece of equipment, both physically and mentally, not only on the flights, but after hard practices like today, and we are playing in 2 days, and tomorrow I'm going to also suggest them to use a compression garment after the practice. Then cold water immersions, cold water therapy. With that, we have to be careful. Of course, there is a strong debate in scientific research when we should apply it. Usually, if you ask me, I have it only mandatory after the game for the players who played more than 25 minutes, and in the next game is in the next 48 hours. We never play next 24 hours. There is a rule that between the games it has to be like 46, 48 hours. I think 46 because of the 2-hour game, just in case they are at the same time. So I would push it in that moment. So usually for us it's Euroleague games, for example, on Friday evening, and then the next game is on Sunday. But for example, on Sunday, since the next game is on Thursday or maybe even Friday, I'm not going to put it mandatory, so this is the only moment when the cold pull is mandatory for all the players who played more than 25 minutes. In other moments, it depends if players want to use it, or maybe some contrast bath one day after the game. We could use it if players are used to go to spa in our training facility, so those could be one of the important parts of recovery. And then I always encourage players to use physios for whatever kind of treatment. Is it just like whatever kind of manual therapy? Is it stretching on the stretch table, or mobilizations, or some massage? Whatever it is, whatever can help is beneficial, So those are the recovery strategies. And then when it comes to practicing, I think it's very important to monitor loads, and not only monitor but manage those loads. And for me it was one really, really interesting topic, and I was really lucky that when I came here to Baskonia immediately recognized the importance of technologies like Catapult. So when I came here, I had the chance to objectively calculate or track loads that we have. And then now my system is that on one hand, I have the external load with Catapult, and then of course I ask players for their RPE after practice, so I can also have the internal loads, and then I can compare them. I can play with those variables, and of course Catapult will offer a lot more when it comes to analysis of movements and so on. So you can see the intensities of movements, and young guys are really into technology, so I don't think that I have to explain how Catapult works. It's something pretty common. And of course, beside the regular external internal load monitoring, I also try to ask players at the beginning of the week on their wellness. So I would use the 5 questions wellness questionnaire. I would also take a look into blood parameters when doc does blood sampling, and we try to do it like every month or every 2 months. Those are valuable data for me. And then, of course, based on the load that I have, I would make acute chronic ratios, to see players who are a little bit underloaded or overloaded. So these are the main things that I'm using in load monitoring and management. If someone is, I can talk about it, not only for your podcast, I can talk about it for 3 days. But if some people are interested in things how I set here in Baskonia, they can take a look on my YouTube channel. There are 2 videos, 2 webinars that I gave for Catapult in Latin America. And over there, I explained in the first video, I think it's like maybe 30-40 minutes video, I explained how I set the load monitoring system and what we use. And then I explained how we do the load management, So for example, just quickly to explain what is behind load management is actually what we do with those values, not at the end of the week, but throughout the week. So for example, we would plan certain loads and with the coach until the first game. And then after the first game, and I think that's the biggest difference between basketball and other sports, because you never know exactly how many minutes one player will play. So after the first game, I can see who is underloaded or who is overloaded a little bit. And then I think the crucial part for us when it comes to load management is actually between those 2 games. In the week with 3 games, you don't have time to practice that much, so it's not going to be that big problem. But when it comes to week with 2 games, I think, for example, if you play Thursday and Sunday, on Friday and Saturday, what you do is the key in order to make some good work in load management. So for example, players who were overloaded, you will talk with the coach and say, hey, which day is more important for you, Friday and Saturday? And most of the coaches will say, hey, for me, Saturday, I want to practice good. And Friday, let's do the adjustments. And then on Friday, you say, okay, this group goes there, this group goes there. We will manage loads. And then on Saturday, we know more or less what we're going to do. And we're going to follow the loads that we want to do. And then on Sunday, if you have players who play many minutes or less minutes, there is no problem because you left enough space so they can be in some kind of a sweet spot zone, So this is more or less the way how I approach it.
Great. A lot of stuff. You mentioned Catapult. You guys are not allowed to wear those in games, right?
No, it's still forbidden from Euroleague, and also it's forbidden from the National League. I don't know if it's in every country that it's forbidden from the National League, but unfortunately for us, Euroleague and ACB League forbid it at the moment.
Okay, so there's a lot of data that you're missing out. How do you make sure to overcome this lack of data?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and I really like that you asked, because I always try to talk about complete load management, because in order to get the acute chronic ratio, you need to have everything in the equation. You need to have training load, you need to have individual skills load, you need to have strength training load, and you need to have a game load. And in some weeks when we play 3 games and we practice 3 times and we have 1 day of recovery, or basically we have the same amount of game load and training load. And what I mentioned in those webinars that could be interesting for the guys, the thing how I cover the game data is based on individual load per minute that player has in friendly games that we recorded in the preseason. So I would have individual profile for all of my players, and I would know exactly how much energy or like how many arbitrary units of work, in this case it's player load for Catapult, they usually spend when they play 1 minute of the game. And then what I use, like I have during the preseason 5-6 games, and it's more than enough minutes. It's like between 100 and 200 minutes calculated for one player, and then I get an average value. And for example, one point guard can have 18 arbitrary units, and one center can have 16, but other center might have 22 arbitrary units because he moves faster, he gets into more contacts, and then based on that individual profile, which is based on 1 minute spent in the game or spent on the court, depends how you calculate it, but it's basically the same thing. You get what you need. After the game, I multiply 22 minutes in the game with the load that I have from his individual profile, and that's how I get the value. Of course, it's the estimation. It's not real what happened, but it's very, very close to what this player does. Of course, it will always depend on the rhythm of basketball game, and it's not the same if maybe you play the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes. But what I can tell you from the research and from my practical experience based on Catapult, usually you don't see very big difference between the first and the last quarter, for example, in basketball, in elite basketball. You might have it in the semi-professional basketball that you see the drop with intensity from the first until the last quarter. But in basketball, for example, it's minimal. And that's what makes the elite basketball elite. And I know that there is a small mistake, but when it comes to a week with 5,000 arbitrary units, and this is the only way how you can collect all of the data and put it all together, I mean, I need to find a way. And for me, this is the most important part. And we need to, for example, put strength in the equation. And strength you cannot calculate with Catapult. So that could be, maybe I took one of your next questions. But we have SRP. So I know if we spend 30 minutes in the weightlifting room and he said that it was 6 out of 10 and we have 180 arbitrary units, yes, it is putting pears and apples together. But for me, this is the only way to talk about everything what is put upon player, and what are the demands of the week to make some conclusions, So this is one of the ways how I approach it.
Great, I like it. That's a lot of stuff. Yeah. And okay, so you just mentioned the weight room. Let's start talking about your philosophy in the weight room.
Well, for me, philosophy in the weight room is, I'm a huge fan of complex training, complex, contrast, however you want to call it, because I think it's very time efficient and you can combine very different things. You can always, with complex contrast work, you can always focus and maintain the basics. And for me, basics are basics. Basic strength when it comes to heavy trap bar deadlift, heavy bench press, pull-ups or weighted pull-ups, split squats, Bulgarian squats, or for the Americans, split squat with the rear foot elevated, and single leg deadlift or single leg squat. For me, those are the most important things that you would do. But it's not everything, because we know it's very low on from the coordination point of view, and we know that in basketball we have a lot of single leg jumps, contact, changes of direction, and so on. So we have to prepare players also for something else, which is much higher on this coordination scale. And that's one of the reasons why I like complex, because in the complex you can add more ballistic work, for example, with or more explosive work with Olympic lifts, medicine ball throws, and then those Olympic lifts can be modified with dumbbells, so you can do from split position, snatch, and end up on a single leg position, and you can even combine it with some specific work for big guys when it comes to low post contact, or you can for guards, you can combine, for example, split squat, heavy split squat with modified Olympic lift, and then you can finish with some kind of a dribble and step back with jump, which will kind of mimic a step back jump shot, So those kind of things in general are something that I really like to do. because I'm looking how to be very effective and use my time wisely. But this is like a general philosophy. But of course, what I'm trying to do is individualize it. So not every guy will do complex and make a transition into some kind of 40 to 60% of 1RM explosive work, and then he's going to move into a specific task. It will be very individual. The guys who need to get bigger, I have to ask myself, can I make him soar? So if he's a young guy who is not playing at all, he's just practicing, well, yeah, let's go. Basic strength, let's chase that max strength that you need. If you haven't reached your max level, and we can talk or we can debate about what is optimal levels of max strength for a basketball player. But beside that max strength training, that I think it's very valuable because we need it for not only like injury prevention or reduction or for safety to your muscles and tendons, but for your overall performance. And when you build your max strength base, everything else it's much easier to put into the program. So like explosive work and so on. But as I said, if the guy needs hypertrophy and we can make him soar, let's go for it and just add some additional exercises with regular and typical principles of hypertrophy, make those muscles fatigue, superset it in different ways, or increase number of reps, the guidelines. I don't have to talk about hypertrophy. If someone knows how to make any program, it's hypertrophy. For most of the coaches is the easiest part. The most important thing when it comes to hypertrophy is that you need time, and you need to make players soar. You need to make that muscle damage, and after that you need to recover well, eat well, supplement well in order to get the greatest benefits. But then what individual needs can be much different. You can have guys with great muscle mass, and if your team doctor says this guy is good, and he's lean, he doesn't have problems with body fat, and he has enough of the muscle mass, and your nutritionist on the team says the same thing, you can start looking for some, and if you agree with that, of course, and then eventually player also agrees with that, because you have some players who are kind of good looking guys, like enough of muscle mass and so on, and then he comes to you and he says, hey my guy, I need 1 or 2 kilos more of that muscle mass. I don't feel safe under the basket, because it's not, I don't know, shooting guard who is just shooting from the outside. He's the guy who penetrates a lot, and he needs his 1 or 2 kilos of muscle mass more in order to be dominant in the contact, But those are just like all of the details that we have to consider, especially in the elite basketball, where players really know their bodies well, most of the guys, But to go back to this individualization, I said we can have players with different things that they need. So some of the guys will need more of reactive strength. Some of the guys will need more of power development and rate of force development. So we can maybe make a force velocity profile with them, and then we can play with the curve, But on the other hand, you might at the beginning of the season see that a reactive strength index for one guy when he does drop jumps, it's not perfect, but he's the guy who plays 35 minutes. How am I going to push him to do drop or depth jumps in the weightlifting room? So it's always a question of like, who is the player, or what I want to do with him, what he wants to do with himself, and what is actually the current situation with him. My philosophy with strength work is that strength development never stops. I'm always looking for the improvements throughout the season. One of the reasons why I believe that development is possible is that during the preseason, we might push many players to do, for example, very, very heavy trap bar deadlift. But I will have a huge risk that players will have sore backs and so on. So I have to go gradually. Even though I know that my players in the preseason can hit very high weights, I have to be patient because I cannot risk with a €1 million guy. I cannot risk because I want to see him doing heavy squats or heavy trap-bar deadlifts. I have to go step by step, and then my goal is to go step by step, and then by Christmas time we're gonna hit those weights that I'm looking for, and we're gonna adapt to it, and they're gonna adapt to it, and then from there on, maybe second part of the season, we're gonna maintain this kind of max weight or like closer to max strength that I'm looking for, and then we will add to it individual needs. And for some player, it can be some specific exercises when it comes to basketball strength, which are very high on the coordination scale. So, for example, very forceful layup with medicine ball, or some kind of a specific move on the low post when it comes to a pivot and a jump under contact. And those kind of things we can put together so I can maintain the levels of max strength or sub-max strength. I want all of the players to reach split squats and split squat with the rear foot elevated with at least kettlebells of 32 kilos, split squats even with 2 kettlebells of 40 kilos. For me, that's something that every elite player should be able to do, especially because in this feet position, split feet, we don't the low back will not suffer as much as it will suffer under the back squat or a trap bar deadlift. So I think everyone should, by Christmas time, they should all be doing those exercises with kettlebells of 32 and 40 kilos. And then, as I said, we can add something that player needs, specific strength or some kind of explosive work. Then this explosive work can be focused more on plyometric work, or it can be more on like concentric rate of force development type of work. So it depends, but this is basically somehow how I put things together when it comes to strength work, you know.
How do you make sure to keep putting the work in, traveling so much? Because you guys travel a lot, and you can also have like 6-day road trips, right?
Yeah. So for example, last week we were on a road trip. Lucky for us, and I want to congratulate this. Use this moment to congratulate to European Players Association when it comes to Euroleague players, because they finally are fighting for great stuff. And one of those great stuff is that once we travel from west to east, we play more games on the road. So, for example, last week we played St. Petersburg and Moscow on Wednesday and Friday, and then we traveled to Madrid instead of going home, and we came back to Spain, but we played Madrid as a third game of that week. And what was great is that in Russia, I had really, really good weightlifting room in the hotel, and all of the guys who needed to lift, we did it. You know, 3-4 guys who are used to lift and who need to lift did great job, and other guys went once, you know, just to stay a little bit. They like to call it like the muscle tonus, you know. But with the other guys, with the young guys who are not playing, but they need, for example, I have 2 guys who are currently under the hypertrophy program, and we managed to do it pretty well. So sometimes we suffer when we travel, but for example, last week I cannot say because it was basically as we stayed at home. You know, we hit weights 3 times. It was good training sessions, 45 minutes, 1 hour, but pretty intense, you know. And sometimes it works. Sometimes also we suffer, you know. Sometimes it can happen that for you travel to some country where in the hotel you have like really bad gym with 1 treadmill and 1 bike, and for some guys the equipment that I carry with myself, the bands and then other stuff won't be enough. So yeah, sometimes we suffer, but I try to do my best, and then we are always trying to find the way to do the things right, you know. And at home, it depends, you know. At home, we are blessed to have a good weightlifting room in the arena where we play, and also in the training facility where we train. So here, there is no excuses not to work.
Great, I like it. Do you have players that like to lift right before games or on game day?
Well, yeah, we do have. Like, for example, for me, tomorrow it's our game day -1. And for me, it will be mandatory to lift, especially because yesterday we had a day off, so we don't have a 3-day cycle before the first game. If we have a 3-day cycle, then I push my players to lift 3 days before the game, 2 days before the game, and then 1 day before the game, it can be optional. But in case we have a day off 3 days before the game, and then we have only 2 days left, I push players to come and lift both days. Of course, tomorrow it's going to be a light day. It's going to be a session of like 20 minutes, just going to 2-3 simple exercises. I don't, with some players, experienced players, I would push like very high weights, just low reps and good rest in between. I'm not afraid of lifting very, very hard. Pushing players to lift very hard. For me, it's all about the reps. If you are going to like really into high level of fatigue, or like if you're rushing through the sets and not taking good rest to go as fresh as possible to the next set. So, for example, tomorrow we're going to lift, and for me, I will push all of the players. I don't have any player on the team this season who will say, I don't lift weights 1 day before the game. That's my rule. I hate it. So I cannot tell you that it will happen tomorrow. And on the game day, we just have, I could say 2-3 players who are used to lift. And out of those 2-3 guys, 2 guys are lifting in the morning after or before shoot around. And then there is 1 guy only who comes and does like a quick lift, explosive lift right before the game. Like when we come to arena, and also away games. He always, once we come to the arena, when we are away, he always tells me, hey, please go and talk to their strength coach to see if there is a gym where I can lift. And he does his lift like for 20 minutes, and it's something that gets him activated and like prepare himself for the contact or whatever he needs,
Interesting. Okay, let's switch gears and let's talk about a performance department, your performance department in Baskonia. You guys gather a huge amount of data, and how do you make sure to be all on the same page?
Well, now Department of Physical Performance in Baskonia is pretty good, pretty large. A couple of years ago, it was not like that. I came here 4 years ago, and the physical performance staff was full-time strength and conditioning coach, and that was me. Then full-time rehab coach, who was ex-strength and conditioning coach, who was here. Oscar Bilbao is his name. He was in the club for more than 20 years as a strength and conditioning coach, and then he applied for master studies at the age of 50. And that's one of the things that I respect the most about his professional side. He's a great person, great guy, awesome guy. I really love him. But then from the professional point of view, I really respect that at the age of 50, he applied for master studies in sports rehab, and he was covering that position, and he still does. And then beside 2 of us, we had sports scientist, which is Julen Castellano, but he was a part-time guy who was more enrolled into Alaves, because we are a foundation, Alaves football team that plays Spanish La Liga, and he was between 2 clubs, so that was pretty small physical performance stuff. And then we had part-time nutritionist who was also in charge for both clubs. And then first year we tried to improve the facilities and the equipment. We try to bring closer medical department with physical performance department, so we can see how we're going to share more information and so on, and how we're going to improve the work that we can improve with those people that we had, And then the second year, we improved a little bit the physical performance department. We brought Ugo, who is strength and conditioning coach in the academy. And that year he was working exclusively with the academy, with younger guys. And he still didn't have, for example, catapult, but he was kind of managing, monitoring, and he was managing load through internal loads, RPEs, and he was trying to kind of do similar thing to what we had in the first team, so we can kind of build a system of load monitoring in the academy as well. Now, from the last season, he also has Catapult, and he uses it with the second team and the junior team, And then it was for us, I think it was a huge step to have Hugo on the team. And then in the third year, Oscar was out of work for a while, so I had to deal with injured guys, and it was kind of exhausting, and it was a tough season for me when it comes to organizing everything. And Hugo was there to help me when I would travel with the team to be with the injured guys. But then this year, Oscar came back, and we even improved the system with another strength and conditioning guy. His name is Luis, and he's taking care of cadets. We have two teams of cadets, and he's taking care of them. And now I can say that physical performance stuff is pretty good, pretty solid, and this is, I think, the minimum that one real system should have, And I'm lucky that we also have a full-time nutritionist from this season. His name is Javi. Javi is here. Javi.
Hey, Javi.
Also, Javi is working his ass off. Now it's 10:15, and he's still here in the office. Yeah, he's really passionate about his work, and he's bringing great value to not only to the first team, but also he's taking care of the youth teams. And I think that's something that we should be, and we are proud of, So year by year, we are kind of building system and trying to organize our things. One of the best things about Hugo, for example, is that he's a very systematic guy, and he's in love with statistics and Excel. He's the guy who would spend Sunday afternoon doing Excel webinars, which is for me, I think I would never do it. And he's the guy who really, really loves it. And he's helping us with this incredible database, as you said. And you cannot imagine. I mean, you can if you're really into Excel and statistics, but if you're not, you cannot imagine what value he brings when it comes to data analysis. And for example, he has like 50 kids in the academy, and we collect so many data throughout the week. And then with one click, he makes individual reports that we send to coordinators of youth teams or head coaches of the youth teams. Strength coaches are sharing amongst them those reports, and even those reports can go to medical staff. So it's really, really valuable, So there is like each person has certain values that are really, really important for our whole system, And then we still have Julen Castellano as a head sports scientist, who is always there to support us with like newest things, newest ideas. If we have some problems with Catapult, he would be the first one to call Catapult to resolve it, and so on,
That's huge. You guys have built a great system, and you can definitely say that you have a blueprint of developing players over there. And I think also it's easier for a player to buy into what you do, actually. Another very important thing is building a relationship with your staff, especially when you have such a great and a huge staff and your players. How do you make sure to develop your relationships?
Well, I think building relationship with someone is the hardest part of our work. And a lot of young and unexperienced coaches are underestimating this part. And basically, they don't understand that usually the personal relationship, beside your professional expertise, but will keep you there where you belong or where you want to be. Why I say it's the hardest part is because for every relationship, you need time to develop it well. And with some players, it means a month or 2 or 3 months. And with some head coaches, it can be 2 months. Sometimes it can be half of the season that you're trying to build really good relationship and trust. So I try to devote a lot of time to it, and not only time, but a lot of my thoughts are focused on how to build and also how to maintain the relationship. Because in the elite basketball, it's very, I'm not gonna say very hard, but it's pretty demanding to build relationships with players, and it's even more demanding to maintain it, because you really have to be careful in this very, very stressful environment. You really have to be careful how you react to every little thing that is happening, like from receiving a basket on the game, or receiving a technical foul, down to traveling early morning when nobody is in a good mood, or having three losses in a row, not receiving maybe paycheck for, like, I don't know, that there it can be like various things, like not receiving money from the ex club that still owes you, and you are you just bought your house, and you need to pay it, or I don't know, you need to pay a school for your kid, and so on. So you need to understand that in order to keep the relationship healthy, you need to work on it on a daily basis. It doesn't matter if it's with players, if it's with medical staff that you know for many years, or it's with the head coach. So for me, it's a great challenge. It's something that I really like, because I can put new things in practice that I think will work better than what I did before. And I think it's incredibly important part of our job, especially if you want to work in the elite level. Because I like to say that you cannot work at the elite level if you don't know shit about your work. But if you know enough and you have incredible social skills and emotional intelligence, you're gonna end up being here. But if you know, I don't know how much, you know that you cannot stop talking about your field. But if your emotional intelligence and your social skills are very bad, and you don't know how to communicate well in the stressful situations, if you don't know when to stop talking, if you don't know how to listen, doesn't matter what you know and how many books you read or how many scientific research you wrote or you read, that will have no impact on you keeping your job. So that's why I think relationships are great. And then when it comes to real work and to be effective in your work, relationship with and communication with head coaches and medical staff, there is even support from science that with poor communication there is less availability for your players, like of your players, so they will play less games, and because they will be more injured. And it's not just like one reference. In team sports, there is a couple of references that already say when staff, coaching staff, medical staff, strength and conditioning staff say that there is a poor communication, there is a high correlation with very bad performance, injuries, and so on. So for me, it's more than enough. But you don't need science to know it, because you can see from a daily work, if you have bad communication and you don't know how to behave, you won't either do a good job because no one's going to listen to you, or second of all, your team will lose and you will have bad atmosphere on the team. And then you will come every day to work and you will just think of the moment when you're going to leave from your work to home.
I agree 100% with you. I like your answer. And another great tool that now we have to build relationship is our podcast. I mean, my podcast and your podcast. Let's talk about a little bit about your project, one-on-one physical performance interviews. Why did you start a podcast, and what is it about?
I thought about it for a while before I started, because I was never a guy who, if you can see, like on my social media, I don't have Twitter. I only have Instagram, and I post photo on Instagram, like, I don't know, every month or every 2 months, just because, I don't know, I have to. But sometimes I would share some stories, especially with the guys who are listening to podcasts, and I try to like share their story just as a just to thank them because they're trying to share also something that I'm trying to share with everyone. And I was never into like having my YouTube channel full of videos. But I thought about it because in Europe, I think there is a lot of great minds, such as you are, and your guests. Okay, your guests were so far mainly from the States, but I know that you plan to also do interviews with European guys, and one of your great friends is Reggie from Maccabi, who is also my great friend, and he was a guest on the interview. And today I just uploaded interview with Kostas from CSKA Basketball. And for me, those are great minds. And every guest that I had, for me, is a great person and a great guy that needs to be listened. And when you when you try to find on YouTube interview with football or like soccer strength and conditioning coaches, you cannot find anything because there is just nothing good. But then on the other side, in basketball, there is nothing. And I want to know those people. Like I would like to know them. And now when I know them through like being in Euroleague for 4 years, I want some other people, especially young people, to listen to those great minds. And why I called my, as you say, podcast, why I called it an interview, because for me, the original idea was this season, I'm going to make at least 15 interviews with great people, and I'm going to keep it on my YouTube channel so every new generation can find on one spot interviews that will cover some topics which are not like hot topics. We are talking about some general topics that will last forever. And I believe that sharing a story is very valuable. Like for me, it's always, but I'm not going to say that it works for everyone who is for so many years in the field. Maybe some guys who are like for 10, 15, 20 years in the field, maybe they cannot be motivated by other people's story. But I think like a lot of young guys can be. And I think this is the greatest value of the interviews. And why I didn't call it podcast, because somehow I see podcast as a type of interview where you very often talk about hot topics. Okay, this guy got injured, or this rule has changed. Let's talk about it, and so on. And then after 1 or 2 years, you watch that episode, and basically 20% of that episode is useful because 80% happened in the past and stayed in the past. So that's why I kind of also build my questions for the guys who I interview, that they're like long-lasting questions, like evergreen questions. And that is basically my idea. And every season I have some personal goals, like beside my job that I do with the team. First and the second season, almost like two years, I did my PhD project beside my work, and I use a lot of time on our flights. I rarely watch Netflix or some. I'm not going to say that I never watch it. I do. Sometimes I also need evening off when I travel for whole day, and all day I'm in front of the computer and books. When I arrive to the hotel, I also want to play an episode of, I don't know, Peaky Blinders or whatever show it is, but for example, during the flights and so on, I rarely watch something from Netflix. I would always read and write and do my thing. So in the first season, it was PhD project. The third season in Baskonia, it was the book, second and the third year. And then when I finished the book, I said, okay, I published the book last year in May. And then I said, okay, I have my summer to think about if I'm going to start the interviews or no. And then I eventually decided that I want to do it. And now this season, I will devote, as I said, to record at least 15 interviews, mainly with people from basketball. But if I have a good chance to record from someone who is in some other sport, like, for example, second episode was with our nutritionist, I'm going to go to and talk to anyone who is related to physical performance. Even in the future, if we're going to continue, I have an idea to interview players, head coaches, everyone who can say something good about physical performance, because in the end, we learn a lot from our colleagues. We learn a lot from books. We learn a lot from podcasts. We learn a lot from seminars and workshops where we go every summer, or if you can travel during the season. But what we forget is that one of the most valuable sources of where you can learn are players. And then that's one of the reasons why maybe in the future I'm gonna put some players in the interview, But I'm not pushing it at the moment, because the first focus is to bring a little bit closer the community of the basketball strength and conditioning coaches. And then in the future, maybe it's gonna be even more like team sports and so on.
I like it. I like it a lot. Actually, my next guest will be a player. I've already had a player. I've already had a player, but that episode was in Italian. And my next episode will be an American player that I had a chance to coach last year, and now he plays in Italy. So stay tuned for that episode.
Looking forward.
You mentioned your book. I have it here. I'm studying it now. Man, this is an amazing book. You can find a lot of great insights and lots of great content. And especially because in this book, you talk about your philosophy. And you really talk about how you do things, which is great for a book about strength conditioning. Do you want to tell us something about it?
Well, I think the most important thing is that people talk about it, and that is something that brings a smile on my face, when people talk about it, when people say that it's valuable for them. And that was my great focus, I think that our field in general lacks books in strength and conditioning in basketball. Now we have a new book from Bill Burgos and his colleagues, strength training for basketball, that I'm going to receive very soon from the Amazon. We are all waiting for it, but still there is not so many books. And what is even more true is that a lot of books are written in the way, this is the way how to do it, these are the exercises, and okay, let's do the exercises. But what is really behind the hard work, especially in the elite teams, and what the elite teams push you to do is like, you need to find a way to be very effective and to consider so many factors on a daily basis that usually young students don't hear and they cannot experience. And I think like a lot of young people think this is the way how I want to coach and this is the way how I'm going to coach. But then on the other hand, if you want to be a part of one team, you need to reconsider many things. So you need to adjust to demands of the competition. You need to adjust to your head coaches. You need to adjust to your elite players. That's the way to work. That's the only way to work. If you don't know how to adjust to those things and consider many factors on a daily basis, then, my friend, for you, it's private coaching, individual work, and that's gonna make you happy, because team environment is definitely not for you.
Okay, really interesting. Okay, Luka, we finish up with some rapid fire questions. So 3 questions. The first one, book that you would like to recommend.
Well, to everyone, I always say that for me, Mike Boyle's work is something that everyone should start with. I respect Mike Boyle for the way how he explained things. For me, it was very valuable because I'm kind of started with his work when I was about to graduate and in my early years of career as a strength and conditioning coach. And for me, everything what I listened from him, everything what I read from him was for me perfect and so well explained that I never had to go and ask another guy to explain it to me. So work that he made in any way, videos or books, for me it is brilliant work. That's the first book that always come into my mind when it comes to professional work.
I agree with you. What's your go-to exercise in the weight room?
Oof. If I have to choose only one,
Only one.
maybe it would be a split squat with rear foot elevated.
I like it. Great answer. And what's your next project?
I honestly I haven't thought about it because I'm in the middle of this project, and when I'm finishing with one project, because this project could last longer than this season, and I'm in the middle of finishing it, so like maybe in May, June, I'm gonna start thinking of either continuing with this project and maybe make something new or make something completely new. But now I'm in the middle of this one and I have full focus on it. So no big projects ahead except this one, because for me this one about the interviews is still a really big one.
Okay, great. So, Luka, a lot of the listeners of Sport Vitamins are young coaches, young strength coaches that are trying to break into professional sports. What kind of nugget you can leave them with?
Hmm. It's a really interesting question, but it's not easy to answer. Uh, can I say a little bit more, like more things?
Of course.
More things. Well, first of all, I think the most important thing is that they try to do every day something to improve themselves, and it doesn't have to be only related to the field of strength and conditioning. Try to learn from the different people. Try to learn from different fields. Try to always improve the way how you approach people and how you communicate with people. If you have to invest in something besides strength and conditioning field, I think the way how to communicate is the most important field if you want to work in the team environment. As I stressed throughout this podcast, throughout this episode, and try to stay passionate, try to show your energy, and try to show that you care, because I like the quote which says that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Theodore Roosevelt said it, and many coaches use it to quote it, but it's simple as that. First focus. That's why I always say that's one of the reasons why you need to focus first on building relationship, and then after that personal relationship or connecting on the personal level before you start showing what you really know and what you want to implement, or what would you recommend to this player to do in the gym or to do for recovery and so on. So this would be probably one of the most important things that I consider in order to be successful in the future, if we are talking to the young guys.
Okay, Luka, thank you very much. I appreciate you. It's been a true honor to have you on, and thanks for hanging out with us tonight.
Thanks a lot, man. Once again, thanks for the invite, and I'm really, really looking forward to meet you personally in March, and I really wish you the best with Sport Vitamins. As I said, I'm a huge fan, and to be honest, one of the Euroleague strength and conditioning coaches, I'm not going to say his name intentionally because it would not be fair, but today we spoke about podcasts, and he told me that recently he started to invest more time into listening podcasts, and then I told him about Sport Vitamins, and then he showed me the screen on his phone, and then on the podcast app, it was one podcast that he recommended me, and then he had next to it your episodes of Sport Vitamins. So I was really, really happy that people are listening to it, because it's a great value. And once again, I congratulate you, and I hope that you will reach today 10th episode, but very soon 100th episode.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. So good luck for the rest of the season.
Thank you.